Let me shift for a minute to BUSA's position. Now that I've covered the political, the economic, and the social aspects. So on the BUSA position, and let me just flag here that BUSA represents roughly 90% of the formal economy. That's in value terms. And BUSA is also premised on 4 sectors. You have corporates, you have professional associations, you have SMEs, and then you've got what we call unisectorials. So we are quite a broad-based church, want of a better word, and you should see my comments in the context of the constituencies that we represent. Priority 1 for us is we have to start attracting investment. And as I indicated earlier, foreign direct investment is critical, because I think that can start unlocking and unleashing a lot of the potential that we have in our country. But we're going to have to continue working hard at creating the right environment, dismantling all the disenablers. And these are the things that the President has prioritized as well. But he might have prioritized them, but we're not necessarily achieving it. So if you are to speak to investors or go on a roadshow or deal with analysts, whether it's in your own company or more broadly, I think that the general consensus would be that we're not achieving all these things that are aimed at unraveling the obstacles to doing business, and that we're not doing sufficiently to create an environment conducive to attracting investment. So that's number 1, is attracting investment. With investment attraction will come growth levels. Now, we would like to see as business the country returning to growth levels of 3% or thereabouts. Those are not aspirational things or aspirational levels. If we do the right things and create the right business confidence, we believe that 3% is achievable in the short to medium term. What are some of these things that we need to do? Firstly, we need to look at our competitiveness and productivity as a country, which I've already alluded to. We need to become a lot more urgent and decisive around some of the structural reforms that we need to embark on in our economy. We need a complete overhaul of the SOEs. Now, that might sound cliched to you, and there's not a week that goes by in our country where someone isn't putting forward a new plan for SOEs and how you re-equitize some of them and how you bring in private equity partners and all the rest of it. But the SOEs, first of all, there are too many of them. They across far too many disciplines, and it's hard to keep a handle. I think at last count, Michael, there were like 700 of these entities. If I just take the economic growth and development agencies in our country, do you really need so many? And then you've got a couple in DTI, and you've got Invest SA, and then you've got a local Gauteng Invest SA. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think we need a consolidation of this. But more importantly, we need to address once and for all the public debt that's sitting in the SOEs. So I'm quite pleased, as much as many of us have seen this debate around Eskom that's manifested, and I think it's good that, business don't agree with the Eskom proposal that Labour put forward on the 3rd of February. But we're pleased that someone has put something on the table for the social partners to discuss, because we need to work through these issues. Rather than people firing salvos every week. They're different salvos, and we never really get to have any consolidation of those salvos. So I think the fact that Labour on the 3rd of February at the Presidential Working Committee put forward a proposal that obviously was mostly not well received by business, the fact that they put something before us, for me, is encouraging. And today, if I weren't here, I would be sitting at another meeting, which is a bilateral between business and Labour. Now, for me, that's really exciting, because if we can get business and labor aligned in our country, and then we get business, labor, and civil society aligned thereafter, it's going to make the road a lot easier to traverse. So that's an encouraging aspect for me. And we've proven as a country, when the chips are down and we do set our minds to it, and we do dialogue and we reach consensus, but consensus based on evidence and empirical stuff, because that's another hobby horse in our country. People come up with their own set of facts. You see it all the time. And often there's a dearth of evidence and empirical stuff that you need to do or to consider to make proper and appropriate decisions. That's often lacking. So I'm really encouraged by this bilateral. It started at 12 o'clock, and it's probably going to end at 5. And if we can get some elements or some, if we can get some alignment on some of the important issues of in our country at the moment, I think that's a massive step forward for me. So I'm quite hopeful. I don't expect massive alignment in the first engagement, but I think we're also understanding as business, we need to have these engagements bilaterally, but we also need to impress upon our social partners the need for urgency. Okay, now, what is the time frame for me? I think a very important calendar landmark in our country is the ANC NGC meeting, the National General Council meeting, which I'm sure everyone in this room will know has been deferred by roughly a month, and it's now going to commence at the end of July this year. Why is that so important? It's important because one of the biggest risks to the country, and it's a risk that we talk about all the time in business, is the factionalization of the ruling party coupled with weak opposition is pulling our country backwards on a daily basis. And I think it's also been widely reported in the media that this factionalization could reach a peak of sorts, or could be heightened at this NGC meeting. So there's a need that between now and February and end of July, that government and the president make certain decisions, some tough decisions between then and now, and that's what we would like to see as business, to mitigate that risk. Because if we're going to have a lame duck president post the NGC, we're going to be pushed closer and closer to the precipice, which is highly undesirable for each and every one of us. It's undesirable for the poorest of the poor in our country. So we're looking at that NGC very carefully as business and saying, well, in these interactions we're having with Labour, we need to be crystal clear that there are certain decisions we need to be encouraging. Now, our President, Sipho Petiana, and I'm going to start going into the third and last part of my presentation. Sipho Petiana is the President of BUSA. BUSA hosted an economic indaba on the 14th of January, so a month ago, and the keynote speaker at the indaba was President Ramaphosa. Sipho opened that particular session by making a statement, and the statement was that we are supportive of President Ramaphosa and his administration as organized business. However, we would like to see a far quicker and more rapid structural reform, and we would also like the President to act with urgency around some of the tough decisions that need to be made. So this is consistent entirely with these 5 months that we've got leading up to the NGC. And I think it's something that each and every one of you are going to have to watch carefully out there, because if we have heightened factionalization, as I say, at the NGC, it's going to create further political uncertainty. With that comes inability to implement it, further decapacitates the state, and it creates further policy uncertainty, and investors will increasingly turn their backs on us. So these are some of the things that we are grappling with as business. Of course, we are concerned with Eskom, but we also are starting to have some glimmer of hope around Eskom, because We've thus far had 2 interactions with Andre de Ruyter and his team as BUSA. And I've been in both of those meetings. My sense is there are 3 parts to fixing Eskom in my mind. The first part is to get operational sustainability. So you stop these outages. The second is dealing with the debt. And the third is how do you strategically reposition Eskom to work for the economy and the citizenry of the country? Those are the 3 areas. In respect to the first, is there an operational plan, a sustainable one emerging? I got a sense from Andre and his team on that day that we are starting to see the emergence of that. I'd been in previous meetings where we had met as BUSA with Brian Malefe and all his predecessors, and I never got that sense. I got a sense that there was a lot of populist talk and rhetoric coming out of them. We got a frank and honest assessment from Andre. None of the good news, the sense I got was, none of the good news the other guys were giving you, not delivering on. With Andre, it was frank. We're going to have a problem for 18 months, but this is how we intend fixing it. And when I listened to him, and as I said, guys, I'm a pharmacist. I'm not the best person maybe to be speaking here, but the Eskom business for me is not as complicated, I think, as we make it out to. There's X number of power stations, and it's about keeping those power stations functional and doing the right maintenance at the right time. I mean, that's your core business. We've overly complicated it, largely because of the corruption and the hollowing out and the nepotism that took place. All of those things is why we are seeing the results we're seeing today. I'm not going to go, just in case I get controversial, I'm not going to go into what the head count was 15 years ago, where it is today. Suffice to say the productivity levels are nowhere today. And these are the issues that I think Andre is set on fixing. We are concerned as business, will Andre be given the political cover that he needs? Because it's also traditional in our SOEs, and I've served on many boards of SOEs, including Transnet, and we actually turned over profit when I was on that board. I was chairman of SA Express when it turned over profit. So I've been in that space, and there is always a risk that you start getting political meddling from the principal. In my days, which was the Mbeki administration, there was very little political meddling, and it probably showed in the numbers at the time. We know that there's been a lot of political meddling, often for all the wrong reasons, with our SOEs. And what we're going to be watching carefully as business is if there's continued political meddling and Andre is not given the right opportunity to deliver, then I think you will start seeing business becoming more vocal. Okay. Another issue that we are concerned with as business, and it feeds onto the investor confidence issue I spoke about, is the land expropriation provisions. Undeniably and indisputably, as BUSA, we support land reform, and we support land reform that's done on an urgent basis. Okay. We do, however, agree with the President that land reform must be done in an organized, structured way that doesn't chase away investors, and they are being chased away at the moment, unfortunately, because we're communicating different messages. It's like a bit of a Tower of Babel when we discuss land expropriation. So we need a consistent message that's going to serve the needs of people who require land, the need to have productive land to contribute towards the economy and exports. And by the way, agribusiness, agriculture is one of the 3 key sectors that can get us to that 3%. The other 2 are tourism and manufacturing, which I'm happy to cover if we get time. But we need this consistent messaging around land reform, that it's done in a structured and proper way, and you're not going to have food security compromised. You're not going to have economic destruction of the order we've seen in some other jurisdictions and geographies globally. Okay, then building a capable state is critical for us. Okay, now you might say to me, well, geez, you've just been telling us how the state's been hollowed out, and no doubt each and every one of you every day has had some bad experience somewhere where the capacity of the state to deliver has been hollowed out. Okay. The way of restoring capacity back to the state is you have to have consistent messaging from the political principles, and you've got to get a restoration of governance and a different mindset that filters through or effuses through public service in our country. And just put very crudely, what's happened in these the last 10 years, not the last 10 years, what's happened is you've had three categories of civil servants or public servants emerging. So you've had the first group that were part of the corruption, and they really went to work every Monday morning to see how they could further jump onto the patronage system or represent someone that's on the patronage system. So that's the first group you had. The second group were a group that wanted to go in and do a proper day's work and make a meaningful difference. And they were blocked and obstructed and became frustrated. That's the second group you've got. The third and final group was a group somewhere in between, where people eventually didn't care because they said, well, you know what, no matter what I do, this thing's not going to work out. So I might as well do as little as I can and also look to leave. And then some of them joined the first group and some joined the second group. So this is how. With the right leadership, and I believe that is what President Ramaphosa is trying to demonstrate. He's trying to go back to a value-based society where if you're in the public service, you're there to serve the public. You're not there to jump on the next patronage plane. So I think that the message that's coming through from him in terms of restoring leadership is going to be important in terms of the building a capable state. However, it's going to also take some difficult decisions, like, for example, entering into proper performance management contracts. It's not great that this sixth administration has been around since June last year, so what's it, about 8 months or so, that many ministers don't have NSDAs or the president yet. But the president has undertaken to fix it. What we need, however, is proper NSDAs and proper monitoring and evaluating. The president's committed to that. He committed to that at our economic indaba. So that, for me, at least we're saying the right things and we're setting the right tone. Of course, we're going to watch carefully whether there's going to be walking the talk here or not.